Welcome to the GED Reading Through Language Arts Test Prep from ultimateged.com. In this video, we'll show you the kinds of questions you can expect on the GED RLA test, based on the official guide. Let's get you ready to pass with confidence. Read the passage below, on the right to remain silent, and answer the following questions. What does the author's inclusion of both Warren's and Harlan's opinions show? This question checks your ability to understand the author's point of view and purpose, a key skill to pass the GED Reasoning Through Language Arts test. Here, you'll read a passage and be asked to figure out what the author believes and why they wrote the passage. Look for how the author supports their opinion and whether they acknowledge or respond to opposing sides. And use clues in the writing like tone, examples, and focus to figure out the author's goal, even if they don't say it clearly. Now let's take a look at the question. What does the author's inclusion of both Warren's and Harlan's opinions show? To answer this, we need to understand what the question is asking. This means focusing on the author's purpose for presenting both sides. To do that, we first need to understand what each opinion is saying and how it contributes to the author's overall message. That's how we arrive at the correct answer. So let's go to the passage and look for where Warren's and Harlan's opinions are mentioned. Now when we look through the passage, we see that Warren's opinion was mentioned in paragraph 2, and Harlan's opinion was stated in the third paragraph. So let's bring both sections to the bottom left of our workspace so we can answer the question. Now let's read paragraphs 2 and 3 and figure out what their opinions tell us. Let's start with the paragraph 2. The paragraph 2 reads, "The majority opinion, written by Chief Justice Earl Warren, said the Fifth Amendment protects people from being forced to incriminate themselves. Warren explained that police often pressure suspects during questioning, and without clear warnings, people might talk without realizing they don't have to. The court said any confession must be given voluntarily, not because of intimidation." The paragraph 3 reads, "Not everyone agreed. Justice Harlan, in his dissenting opinion, said the decision would make it harder for police to do their jobs and might help guilty people avoid punishment. He believed the system already had enough protections in place, and adding more would only benefit criminals." So in the second paragraph, Warren's opinion tells us that fair treatment and clear legal protections are more important than just getting a confession. In paragraph 3, Harlan's opinion is telling us that the court's decision went too far and could weaken law enforcement by protecting suspects more than needed. So, when we compare both opinions, we see that while Warren's focuses on protecting individual rights, Harlan's emphasizes public safety and police effectiveness. By showing Warren's majority opinion and Harlan's dissent or disagreement, the author is helping readers to understand that the ruling on Miranda versus Arizona was not one-sided. It was a controversial decision that sparked serious debate about how to balance individual rights with public safety, and both opinions presented strong and valid arguments. The author includes both viewpoints to show why the decision mattered and to highlight how it was viewed differently by members of the court. This gives readers a more complete and balanced understanding of the passage and its impact. This is why the author included both Warren's and Harlan's opinions in the passage. Thus, when we look through the answer options, it's therefore option D, that there were strong arguments on both sides of the decision. Before we move on to the next question, please encourage us to post more videos and help more students pass by liking, sharing, and subscribing. We really appreciate it. Read the passage below, on the runaway train, and answer the following questions. What does the phrase, "the landscape became a streak of motion, like a painted blur," in paragraph 2 suggest? This is a great example to examine your understanding of tone and figurative language in a GED Reasoning Through Language Arts test. On the GED test, you'll need to recognize how tone, word choice, and figurative language work together to create meaning, express emotion, and support the author's purpose. Now, let's look at the question. What does the phrase, "the landscape became a streak of motion, like a painted blur, in paragraph 2 suggest? To answer this, we need to understand what figurative language is. Figurative language is when an author uses words or expressions that go beyond their normal literal meaning to create vivid images or emotions. A common type of figurative language is a simile. A simile compares two different things using the words like or as. It helps the reader picture something more clearly by relating it to something familiar. Now, since we're focusing on paragraph 2, let's go to the passage and bring that part to the bottom left of our workspace so we can use it to answer the question. Note that the phrase, "the landscape became a streak of motion, like a painted blur," is a simile that describes how the scenery outside the train looked as it picked up speed. This is because the phrase compares the moving landscape to a streak of motion and a painted blur. Notice that the phrase uses the word like in its comparison. Now let's interpret the simile to better understand the meaning the author is trying to create. Let's take the two comparisons in the phrase, streak of motion and painted blur, and analyze them to understand what they mean in real life. Let's start with the first part, streak of motion. This creates an image of something long and stretched out, like when something moves so quickly that your eyes can't fully catch it. Now let's look at the second part of the phrase, painted blur. This part creates the image of colors or shapes smudged together, like in a painting that's been brushed across too fast to stay clear. So when we combine the two parts together, the phrase tells us that the train was moving very fast. So fast that everything outside looked like one long, blurred image instead of separate, clear shapes. The phrase also suggests that the people looking out the window couldn't keep up with how quickly the scenery was changing. This is how you interpret similes in a passage, by breaking down the two things being compared, to better understand the feeling or image the author is creating. Thus, when we look through the answer options, it's therefore option B. The train was moving at very fast speeds. Read the summary of Sojourner Truth's speech in 1851, "Ain't I a Woman?" and answer the following questions. How does the picture in the passage support Sojourner Truth's argument in her speech? This question is a great example for testing your ability to use data, graphs, or pictures as evidence in a passage, a key skill to pass the GED Reasoning Through Language Arts test. Here, you'll be asked to analyze how data, graphs, or pictures support the author's claim or argument. Now let's take a look at the question. How does the picture in the passage support Sojourner Truth's argument in her speech? To answer this, we first need to understand what Sojourner's argument is. That is, to find clues in her speech that gives us a central idea of what she is saying. Note that the clues we will be looking for would be about things that she says she has done or has happened. Then we analyze the photograph and find clues that tell us how the picture supports what she is saying in her speech. That is how we arrive at the correct answer. So let's go to the passage and find clues that help us understand what she is trying to say. The first clue is the title, "Ain't I a Woman?" This clue signals a question of identity and recognition. The phrase, "Ain't I a woman?" suggests that the speaker's speech is about her being denied acknowledgement as a woman. It tells the reader that this speech will challenge the idea of who gets counted as a woman and who gets treated with respect. Since the first clue is the heading, we have a line of thinking to follow, that is, to focus on areas in the speech that speak about denied recognition and rights as a woman. This narrows down where to look. The second clue we see is, "Ain't nobody ever helped me," in paragraph 2. In this clue, Sojourner Truth is pointing out that she is not treated like other women. No special help or protection has ever been given her. It shows that society denies her womanhood and rights, even though she is a woman. The third clue we see is, "I worked hard, been beaten, bore 13 children." In this clue, Sojourner Truth lists hard labor, suffering, and motherhood as her experiences. She has done all these things, just like many women, and yet she's treated with less respect. So when we combine these three clues, Sojourner Truth is saying that even though she has lived through everything that defines womanhood, she is still not treated with the respect or rights that women are supposed to have. She is saying, I've earned my place. I am a woman, so why don't I get treated like one? There are other clues in the speech that can lead you to the same answer, but it's best not to get caught up in too many details. This can waste valuable time on just one question. Now, let's look at the photograph. The photograph is a portrait of the speaker, Sojourner Truth, taken around 1864 as a visiting card. Now let's analyze the picture to find clues that support the general argument Sojourner Truth makes. So when we look through the image, we see three clues. The first clue, her posture and presence. She is seen seated with confidence and calm authority, not slouched or passive. This tells us she carries herself with dignity, just like the women in society who are respected, supporting her demand for equal treatment. The second clue is the knitting on her lap. She is seen holding a traditional domestic skill. This tells us she's visually claiming her place in womanhood through a role that society usually respected. In the 1800s, knitting wasn't just a hobby, it was a practical skill for making and mending clothing. Thus, the knitting in her lap tells us she's not sitting idly. She's actively doing something useful, which shows she takes care of her own needs. The third clue is the caption, I sell the shadow to support the substance. She printed this phrase under this photo. This tells us that Sojourner Truth is in control of her image and is using it to fund her mission. She knew her worth and used photography to demand attention and respect. So these three clues, when put together, tell us that Sojourner Truth is saying, I am a woman. I have dignity. I have strength. I am self-reliant and capable. I deserve to be seen, heard, and respected, just like any other woman. So when we go through the answer options, the correct answer is therefore option D. It portrays her as strong, self-reliant, and dignified, supporting her claim that she worked hard and deserved equal rights. Read the passage below, on the runaway train, and answer the following questions. What can be inferred about the elderly man's personality and past experience based on his comment? This question checks your understanding of drawing conclusions, making inferences, and evaluating evidence, a key skill to excel on the GED Reasoning Through Language Arts test. Here, you'll be expected to make generalizations from evidence, use main ideas to draw logical conclusions, describe the steps of an argument, and identify evidence used to support a claim or conclusion. Now let's take a look at the question. What can be inferred about the elderly man's personality and past experience based on his comment? To answer this, we need to understand what an inference is. An inference is a smart guess you make based on clues in the text and what you already know. It's not directly stated, you figure it out by reading between the lines. Now, to make an inference, we need to examine the evidence in the passage. The clues we find, like tone, actions, or words, help us draw logical conclusions about what's not directly stated. That's how we figure out the best answer to the question. So let's go to the passage and look for where the elderly man made the comment. Now when we look through the passage, we see that the elderly man's comment was made in the fourth paragraph. So let's bring that section to the bottom left of our workspace so we can answer the question. Now let's read the paragraph 4 and analyze it to find clues surrounding the elderly man's comment. The clues we will be looking for are his tone, actions, and words that reveal something about the elderly man. The paragraph 4 reads, Noah's heart pounded. He turned to the elderly man seated beside him. The man, oddly calm, adjusted his hat and said, Sometimes, you just have to think fast, son. So in the fourth paragraph, we find the clues based on his tone, actions, and words. Now let's look at the clue based on tone. The clue is, oddly calm. This was around the time when others were panicking. The elderly man is staying composed. This calmness in a stressful situation suggests that the elderly man is confident or has been in similar situations before and is used to handling them. The word oddly is the author's way of saying the elderly man's calmness is unexpected. Now let's look at the clue based on his actions. This clue is, adjusted his hat. This is a casual, controlled action. The elderly man is not flinching or reacting with fear like everybody else on the train. He looks to be in control even when things feel uncertain. Now let's look at the clue based on his words. The clue is, sometimes you just have to think fast, son. The elderly man offers advice that sounds like it comes from experience. The word, just, he uses, makes it sound like second nature to him, not scary or new. So, based on these three clues, we can infer that the elderly man likely has experience with emergencies or stressful situations. His calm and reassuring tone shows a steady, thoughtful personality. The elderly man is someone who stays focused, under pressure. Thus, when we look through the answer options, it's therefore option C. He may have experience staying calm under pressure. Read the excerpt from the petition, Stop the Dakota Access Pipeline, DAPL, and the excerpt from the article, Stand with Standing Rock Below, and answer the following questions. How do the petition and the article differ in how they present the same core issue? This question checks your understanding of comparing different ways of presenting ideas, a key skill needed to pass the GED Reasoning Through Language Arts test. Here, you'll be presented with different passages and be asked to compare how two texts differ in purpose, tone, organization, point of view, or the impact they have on the reader. Now let's take a look at the question. How do the petition and the article differ in how they present the same core issue? To answer this, the safest and smartest approach is to focus on the keywords in the question. That means identifying and understanding the important words, what they mean and why they matter to the reader. That's how we arrive at the correct answer. Now the keywords in the question are petition and article. So let's define what a petition and an article are and their purposes. Let's start with a petition. A petition is a written request that people sign to show they agree with a cause or want something to change. A petition is usually sent to people in power, like the government or an organization, to ask them to take action. Its audience usually includes lawmakers, leaders, and the general public. The purpose of a petition is to call on its readers to take action. And it does this through key features such as clear demands, strong reasons, facts, and a collective voice. For example, the phrase "we, the undersigned." A petition helps readers feel like they are part of a larger group working for change. Now let's define what an article is and its purpose. An article is a piece of writing that informs, explains, or persuades its readers about a topic. It is usually found in newspapers, magazines, websites and blogs, and educational or academic journals. Its audience includes the general public, students, and professionals. The purpose of an article is to appeal to its readers in order to gain their support, raise awareness, or help them better understand an issue. And it does this using key features such as descriptive or emotional language, facts, examples, and point of view. An article tries to connect with readers to make them care. Note that a petition tries to get something done, while an article tries to get you to understand or feel something. So now that we understand what a petition and article are, let's read through the petition and article and figure out what the two passages are telling us. Now, when we look through the petition, we see that it speaks to the decision makers, and it strongly asks them to take an action. That is, to halt the construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline. It also informs readers about the dangers of the pipeline. We see the key features it uses to do this, such as collective voice, reasons, and clear demands. Notice that the petition is addressed to Congress, showing that this is a political effort to influence government to bring about change. Thus, we can say that this petition focuses on getting results by urging leaders and readers to act immediately to stop the construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline. Now, when we look through the article, we see that it appeals to the general public about the threat of the Dakota Access Pipeline. The article does this by using key features such as facts, examples, and point of view, all highlighting the risks the pipeline places on local residents. The article engages the readers too about the inequality and injustice faced by the natives. So we can say that this article is a persuasive and informative message that focuses on raising awareness, building understanding, and appealing to the emotions of its readers about the Dakota Access Pipeline issue. Thus, when we look through the answer options, it's therefore option A. The petition urges direct political action, while the article appeals more to values and justice. Read the excerpt from the petition, Stop the Dakota Access Pipeline, DAPL, and the excerpt from the article, Stand with Standing Rock below, and answer the following questions. An environmental group is creating a campaign called Land Over Oil. Which message would best reflect the argument made in both the petition and the article? This is a great example of extending your understanding to new situations, a necessary skill for passing the GED Reasoning Through Language Arts test. Here, you'll be asked to combine information from different sources, draw conclusions, and transfer information to new situations. Now, let's take a look at the scenario-based question. An environmental group is creating a campaign called Land Over Oil. Which message would best reflect the argument made in both the petition and the article? To answer this, we need to identify and understand what the key idea is in the question. Then, based on this understanding, we look through both the petition and article to figure out the central message they give. That's how we arrive at the best answer. Now, the key idea in the question is in the campaign title, Land Over Oil. So let's define what the phrase, Land Over Oil, means. The phrase, Land Over Oil, is a slogan or message that means protecting the land, environment, and the rights of indigenous people is more important than extracting oil for profit. So now that we understand what the phrase, Land Over Oil, means, let's read through the petition and article and figure out what the two passages are telling us. As we read, we'll only focus on parts that connect to the meaning of land over oil. Those are the arguments both the petition and the article are making. Now, when we look through the petition, we see that it speaks against the construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline, and we see that it makes arguments that align with the meaning of the phrase, land over oil. They are, in paragraph 2, when it talks about how the project violates treaty rights, threatens water quality for millions, and contributes to the climate crisis. How thousands of water protectors stood in peaceful protest to defend the land and demand justice. And the demand to invest in clean, sustainable energy solutions. Subsequently, in paragraph 3, water is life, and the people and the planet deserve protection, not pipelines. These areas are the main arguments the petition makes that align with the meaning of the phrase, land over oil. Now, in the article, we see similar arguments made that support the phrase, land over oil. They are, in paragraph 4, that sacredness was threatened when the Dakota Access Pipeline, DAPL, was rerouted. In paragraph 5, how a single spill could devastate both the water supply and the spiritual lands of the tribe, and respecting native sovereignty and ending a long history of injustice. And in paragraph 6, thousands came to protest peacefully, their message, water is life. Notice that we only looked for the ideas that match the meaning of the phrase in the question. Everything else was just background. Thus, we can say that the arguments made in both the petition and article speak clearly to respecting the environment and the rights of indigenous people more than getting profit. That is the central message they each give. Thus, when we look through the answer options, it's therefore option C. Respect for the environment and indigenous rights must come before profit. Read the passage below, on the runaway train, and answer the following questions. What is the main setting of the passage? This is a great example of a reading for meaning question in a GED Reasoning Language Arts test. Here you will be presented with a passage and asked to draw a logical conclusion about settings. Now, a main setting refers to the primary time and place where the story or passage happens. A main setting is where most of the action takes place. The main settings of a passage is the where and the when of the story. The where is the location the story takes place most of the time, and the when is the time the story takes place. Now, to answer this question, we need to find out the where and the when of the story. Note that the where and when of a story are usually introduced at the beginning of the passage, most often in the first 1 or 2 paragraphs. So let's go to our passage and bring the first and second paragraphs to our bottom left side and use it to answer our question. Now let's find the where in the story. So let's look through our passage for clues that tells us the location of the story. So when we look through the passage from the beginning, we see that Noah is on a train. The clues are in the first 2 sentences of the passage. That is from Noah, always finding comfort in the steady rhythm of a train's wheels on tracks, to Noah settling into his seat, in the presence of a conductor. These are the clues the story gives us to show that it's about Noah on a train. Now let's look for clues that give us the when in the story. That is, when the main action of the story began to happen. Let's continue looking through paragraphs 1 and 2. The first clue is, but then, something felt off. This tells us that the normal train ride Noah has been experiencing is changing. The second clue we see is, the conductor passed by without checking tickets. This unusual behavior hints something serious is starting. The third clue we see is, moments later, the train jolted forward and began to move faster. This is the exact moment the main action begins, that is, the train speeds up. And this speeding train is further supported in the 4th sentence of paragraph 2, when outside, the landscape became a streak of motion, like a painted blur. So in just the first paragraph, we know Noah is on a train, and then suddenly the train begins gaining speed. Then in the second paragraph, it backs the speeding train, with evidence that everything outside starts to look like a painted blur. This is when tension starts, fear builds, and the rest of the story unfolds. Note that there are many more clues throughout the passage that show the where and the when in the story. But on the GED test, it's best to look for just enough clear clues to answer the question. Don't spend too much time searching for every detail. So we have found the main setting of the story. That is, Noah is on a speeding train. Thus, when we look through the answer options, it's therefore option C, a speeding train. Read the passage below, on the runaway train, and answer the following questions. What role does paragraph 1 play in the structure of the story? This is a great example of checking your ability to recognize how a paragraph fits into the whole structure of the passage on a GED Reasoning through Language Arts test. On the GED test, you'll be asked to figure out how each part of a passage is organized and how it supports the author's main idea. This includes spotting transitions and understanding the flow of the text. Now let's look at the question. What role does paragraph 1 play in the structure of the story? To answer this, we need to understand the purpose paragraph 1 serves. Whether it is introducing something, building tension, or giving background to something in the story. Now, since we're focusing on paragraph 1, let's go to the passage and bring that part to the bottom left of our workspace, so we can use it to answer the question. Now, to understand the purpose of paragraph 1, let's read it carefully and figure out what role it plays in the passage. So in this paragraph, we are introduced to Noah as the main character. At first, everything seems normal and calm as he settles into his seat and looks out the window. Then the paragraph sets up the problem when the conductor behaves strangely. He doesn't check tickets and quietly whispers to another crew member. This unusual behavior causes the mood to shift from calm to concern. Next, when the second crew member rushes to the front and the train suddenly speeds up, the concern grows into tension and fear. At this point, it becomes clear that something is seriously wrong with the train. So the author uses paragraph 1 to set the scene and introduces the main conflict. Noah is on a train that begins acting dangerously. Notice how the mood on the train starts off calm, shifts to concern, and then builds to tension and fear. This change in mood throughout paragraph 1 follows the events and helps establish the story's central problem. Thus, when we look through the answer options, it's therefore option D. It sets the tone and introduces the main conflict. Read the passage below, on the runaway train, and answer the following questions. What is the most likely theme of the passage? This question checks your ability to identify and create arguments, a necessary skill to pass the GED Reasoning through Language Arts test. Here you'll be asked to summarize key information and recognize how ideas connect. You will also be tasked with finding the theme of a passage and explain how it's shown through events, characters, or details. Now, let's take a look at the question. What is the most likely theme of the passage? To answer this, we need to understand what a theme is. A theme is the main takeaway in the story. It is the message the author wants the reader to think about or learn. Now, to find the theme of the story, it's often helpful to look at the first and last paragraphs of the story. So when reading these two parts, you need to ask yourself, what changed, or what was the message? Now, since we're focusing on the first and last sections of the passage, let's go to the passage and bring the first and last paragraph to the bottom left of our workspace so we can answer the question. Now let's read the first and last paragraph and analyze them to find the theme of the passage. Let's start with the first paragraph. The last paragraph reads, So in the first paragraph we see that the main character, Noah, starts off calm when he settles into his seat on the train. But that calmness quickly turns into suspense when something feels off. The conductor passes by without checking tickets and whispers to another crew member. Then, the suspense shifts to fear as the train suddenly jolts forward and begins speeding up. Now, in the last paragraph, we see an emotional shift in the main character, Noah, as he builds up his resolve. He sits up straight, ready to act. His fear turns into courage. So, after analyzing both the first and last paragraphs, we can tell that the theme of the story is about having courage in the face of a dangerous situation. It is about Noah choosing to face whatever comes next head-on, despite his fear. Thus, when we look through the answer options, it's therefore option A, overcoming fear with courage. Read the passage below, on the runaway train, and answer the following questions. What is the relationship between the speaker's announcement in paragraph 3 and the events in paragraph 1? This question checks your understanding of main ideas and details, a key skill to pass the GED Reasoning through Language Arts test. Here, you'll be presented with a reading passage and asked to determine the relationship between ideas and analyze how details develop the main idea. Now, let's take a look at the question. What is the relationship between the speaker's announcement in paragraph 3 and the events in paragraph 1? To answer this, we need to understand what paragraph 1 is showing and what paragraph 3 is saying. That means identifying the main ideas in each paragraph. Now, a main idea is the key message the author wants you to understand in a paragraph or passage. So once we know the main ideas, we can see how they are connected, and that's how we figure out the relationship between them. Now, since we are focusing on paragraphs 1 and 3, let's go to the passage where the two sections are and bring them to the bottom left of our workspace, so we can answer the question. So let's read paragraphs 1 and 3 and figure out what their main ideas are telling us. Let's start with the paragraph 1. The paragraph 3 reads, so in the first paragraph, the main idea tells us that something unusual and possibly dangerous is happening on the train, even though no one has explained it yet. There is a buildup in suspense here. We see this when something feels off. The conductor behaves strangely and passes by without checking tickets, then whispers to another crew member. That crew member then rushes to the front of the train, and suddenly, the train starts to speed up. In paragraph 3, the main idea tells us that the speaker confirms something is seriously wrong. The train has a brake problem. So, when we relate the two main ideas, we see that the speaker's announcement in paragraph 3 explains why something felt wrong, and it confirms the reason for the conductor's strange behavior in paragraph 1. This is the relationship between the main ideas in paragraphs 1 and 3. Thus, when we look through the answer options, it's therefore option B. The announcement confirms that something is wrong with the train. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe for more. Check out our other GED videos on YouTube. Don't forget to visit ultimateged.com for more exclusive content, a GED social group, complete GED math course, and take a free test.